Have you ever been judged before you even spoke a word? Have you ever walked into a place where people looked at you not with curiosity, but with quiet disbelief as if you didn't belong there? Now, imagine boarding a first-class cabin. You've worked your whole life to be here to earn this seat, this moment of quiet pride. And yet, before the plane even takes off, a flight attendant smirks and says, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" What would you do? Would you fight back? Would you stay silent and let the world misunderstand you again? Or would you choose something harder to stay calm, to let your dignity speak louder than your anger? This is the story of two black women who were mocked in first class, only for the flight attendant to realize, moments later, that they were not just passengers. They were the CEOs of the airline itself. It's a story about prejudice and grace, about how power doesn't always shout sometimes. It simply sits still and lets the truth reveal itself. So before you judge someone, ask yourself, do you really know who they are or what they've overcome to be here? Because sometimes the people you underestimate are the very ones who built the sky you're flying through. If this story already touches something inside, you don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin this unforgettable journey together. The sound of metal hitting the chair was dry and cold. A female voice rang out, harsh and hard as a knife just drawn from its sheath. "You people never learn how to behave in first class." The first-class cabin froze. The sound of spoons stopped mid-air. A passenger dropped a copy of the Wall Street Journal. No one spoke. There was only the sound of the wind rushing through the fuselage, and the heartbeats of two black women sitting in the front row, steady, but deep and heavy. "Doctor." Maya Thompson looked up. Her eyes were calm, but her gaze was as cold as a frozen lake. Beside her, Leah Collins gently set down her glass of water, not spilling a drop. None of them responded with a word. They just stared at the woman standing before them, Flight Attendant Heather Adams, with a silence that made the air suffocating. A passenger behind her made a soft click. A phone was raised. Then 2, 3 more. The light from the screen reflected off Heather's face, making her flinch, but the pride in her voice remained. "Ladies," she said, her lips curling into a wry smile, "please remember that first class means first-class behavior." The space was dense. No one moved. Maya still looked at her, slowly asking, "And how do you define first-class behavior?" The question was light, but it fell like a small stone into still water, causing ripples. A middle-aged man in seat 3C coughed softly and turned away. Heather laughed coldly. "I don't make the rules, ma'am. I just expect passengers to follow them." Leah spoke softly, her voice low and calm. "We just wanted tissues, and you threw them into the trash can in front of us. If that is behavior, then perhaps your concept of first class is a little different from mine." A murmur arose. A silver-haired woman whispered, "This is not right." Heather took a deep breath, looked around, and then said softly but loudly, "Let's keep this professional. I'll have security meet us when we land." The word security startled a few passengers. Leah gave a thin, thread-like smile. "You can do that. But before you call anyone, make sure you know who you're talking to." Leah's voice wasn't high, nor was it harsh. It was like the calm before a storm. Outside the window, the sky was a sea of white clouds. The sun was slanting, casting a golden light on the wings of the plane. For a few seconds, the first-class cabin was silent except for the wind and breathing. Then the captain's voice rang out, warm and clear over the intercom. "Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to take a moment to welcome two very special passengers on board today. Dr. Maya Thompson and Ms. Leah Collins, co-founders of Skyline Air, and, as of this morning, the new owners of West Airlines. No one had time to react. Heather stood there, stunned. The serving tray in her hand tilted, and a few drops of red wine fell to the floor, spreading like spilled lipstick. Leah turned to Maya, her eyes soft, not gloating, just a familiar quiet sadness. Heather stammered, her voice dry. "Wait, what did he just say?" A passenger behind replied, almost in a whisper. He said, "They own the airline." The noise died down, and then the applause grew sporadic, then full and passionate. A few people stood up and nodded at the two women. Maya just smiled and nodded back. She didn't look at Heather anymore. She just looked out the window, where the sky was wide open, without borders, without color, without class. In that moment, Maya thought to herself, if respect had to wait until people knew who you were, the world would still be learning its first lesson in civilization. The plane flew on, silent among the clouds. But in that silence, something had changed, not just for Heather, but for everyone watching. And that flight, they would never forget. 6 hours before the captain's voice sounded, the New York sky was still covered with a thin layer of fog, like the breath of a city just waking up. Yellow taxis slid down the road leading to JFK International Airport, leaving long trails of light in their wake. Dr. Maya Thompson set her small suitcase beside her feet. She wore a gray beanie, a long beige coat, and light, serene makeup. Beside her, Leah Collins held a steaming latte, smiling as she looked around the check-in area, which was starting to fill up. "I've always loved the feeling of being at the airport," Leah said, her voice low. "It's where all journeys begin. No matter where you go, you have one thing in common: hope." Maya chuckled. "Hope and long lines." They both burst out laughing, their laughter mingling with the chaotic sounds of the flight call loudspeaker, the rolling of suitcase wheels, and the clicking of high heels on the stone floor. They arrived at the check-in counter of West Airlines, the airline they had just completed their acquisition last night, a deal worth more than $1.2 billion. But this morning, they were not there as executives or investors. They were just there to experience the service through the eyes of ordinary passengers. Maya said softly, "No one knows who we are, and that is the best thing. To reform, you have to see what people hide when their superiors are around." Leah nodded. "Right. We're not CEOs today. Just two black women on a business trip." The statement was simple, but there was a hint of irony in Leah's voice that Maya understood all too well. Two black women in first class that still confused a lot of people, even in 2025. They walked up to the counter, behind the sign that read First Class Check-In. A tall, blonde woman in a Navy flight attendant uniform was smiling and chatting with a middle-aged couple who had just finished checking in. When it was Maya and Leah's turn, her smile faded. "Excuse me," she said, her voice still soft but cold enough to be heard. "This counter is for first class only. The economy counter is over there." Maya tilted her head slightly, her eyes looking straight ahead, not angry. She placed the tickets on the counter. "I think you should review our tickets." The young employee next to him quickly scanned the QR code. The screen displayed bright yellow text, "Private Executive Access, Owner Class." The young man paused for a moment, looking at Maya in confusion, then glanced at the blonde woman, Heather Adams, the head flight attendant. Heather smiled wryly. "Oh, I guess the system is having a bit of a problem. You know, sometimes it just goes wrong." "Maybe," Leah replied lightly. "But usually the fault lies with the people, not the system." The silence was awkward for a few seconds. Maya put her hand on his shoulder, as if to say no more. She turned to the young clerk. "Thank you. We're fine." As the two of them dragged their suitcases away, Heather stood there watching them with cold eyes. She didn't say anything, but her lips pursed, and she sighed softly, as if she was enduring something unbearable. The first-class lounge was on the upper level, much quieter. Warm yellow light streamed through large windows overlooking the runway. The smell of roasted coffee and soft jazz filled the air. Maya chose a window seat. She looked out at the planes taxiing, their lights flashing. Leah opened her laptop and reviewed the culture transformation plan they were going to release after the deal was announced. "We're going to face a lot of backlash," Leah said. "People don't like change, especially when it comes from two women like us." Maya nodded, her voice small. "It's okay. We've been through worse." A moment later, a white, silver-haired, slow-moving old man sat down next to them. He smiled gently. "Are you two on Flight 908? I heard there's a light storm in the south." "I hope it won't affect you," Leah replied. "Yes. We flew to Los Angeles." The old man nodded, looking at them kindly. "I was a pilot for over 30 years. Now I'm retired. Whenever I see women, especially women of color, sitting in this cabin, it makes me happy. Back then, that was rare." His words made Maya smile. "Thank you. I hope the next generation will find it okay." They talked a little more. Then he stood up and wished them a good flight. As he left, Leah looked after him, saying absently, "Good people always surprise us in the most unexpected places," Maya replied. "And so does the prejudiced." She spoke without turning her head, but Leah knew she was thinking of Heather. An announcement came over the loudspeaker: Aero West Flight 908 to Los Angeles. Now boarding. First-class passengers. Please proceed to Gate 7. They stood up. The white light caught Maya's black hair in thin streaks. She took a deep breath. "Come, my friend. Let's see what we can learn from reality today." On the way to Gate 7, Heather was standing there, passenger list in hand. When she saw them, she nodded, her professional smile back, but her eyes still held an annoyed glint. "Welcome aboard," she said, her voice soft but slightly cold. "I hope you enjoy your flight." "I believe so," Leah replied with a soft smile. The two of them stepped through the metal doors and took a deep breath. The distant sound of an engine echoed, like the heartbeat of the world. Little did they know that in a few hours, that first-class cabin would become the stage for a social lesson bigger than any conference they had ever attended. Before boarding, Maya turned back to look at the arrivals hall. The morning light reflected off the glass, and for a moment, she saw herself and Leah among hundreds of others. No CEOs, no titles, no power, just two women with dreams of respect, equality, and freedom. She smiled, whispering as if to herself, "Sometimes, to see the sky clearly, we have to fly through the clouds." Then she walked away, gently, calmly, carrying the stillness of one who knows that the storm cannot hurt one who understands himself. The Aero West first-class lounge glowed with a pale yellow light from the ceiling. The smell of Arabica coffee mixed with the light scent of wood in the air. Everything was so elegant and luxurious that it felt like a place not for hurry. Dr. Maya Thompson sat by the large window overlooking the runway, where a plane had just lifted off, leaving a long, thin, white trail of smoke in the dark blue sky. Leah Collins put her laptop down, pulled up the sleeves of her sweater, and leaned back in her chair, watching her friend. "What are you thinking about?" Maya smiled slightly, her hand still resting on the steaming cup of mint tea. "I think about the way people look at me. Just for a few minutes. The look in their eyes says it all. Leah frowned. You mean Heather? Maya nodded slightly. She didn't need to say much. The way she stopped smiling, the way she emphasized her voice when she said first class only, it was something I was used to. We've had this face, this skin color, all our lives. It doesn't take a curse to let us know we're being judged. Leah was silent for a moment, then exhaled softly. I hate that feeling. It's like a layer of dust, not heavy enough to knock you down, but enough to never feel clean. The sound of coffee brewing echoed from the bar. A waiter approached and placed 2 hot croissants in front of them. Please try this. It's a new dish at our restaurant. He spoke cheerfully, his eyes polite and friendly. Leah smiled. Thank you. She looked at Maya, shrugging slightly. See, there are still good people. Maya smiled gently in response, then quietly broke off a piece of bread. She chewed slowly, looking out the window at the technicians moving around the plane. There are many good people, but the ones who dare to speak up when they see something wrong are rare. The statement made Leah pause. She looked at Maya for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. A group of passengers had just entered the waiting room. Among them were 3 men in dark suits and patent leather shoes, their voices loud enough to drown out the background music. They looked around, choosing seats 2 rows away from Maya and Leah. One of the 3, who appeared to be a senior Aero West executive, glanced at them briefly, then turned to his colleague and chuckled. Maya couldn't hear it, but she recognized the smile, half contempt, half curiosity. The smile of people who think they know how the world works, and certainly don't think 2 black women are up there with them. Leah put down her laptop, bowed her head low, and said in a small voice, Do you think they recognize us? Maya replied, They think people like us can't own what they work for. She finished speaking, smiling lightly. The smile of someone who was used to silence was the only weapon needed. A moment later, another waiter approached the group of men and asked something quietly. One of them said loudly, Bring us something decent, not this cheap coffee. The words made a few people around turn around. Maya frowned slightly. Leah whispered, We are all employees, but not everyone is like Heather. Maybe the company culture needs to change from the root. Maya nodded. We'll start there. But to change, we have to see reality. How people behave when they don't know they're being watched. Leah smiled slightly, her eyes shining with faith. You always see the good in the bad, Maya replied. If we didn't believe that good exists, we wouldn't have tried this hard. The loudspeaker announced that another flight was about to depart. Everyone in the waiting room moved slightly. Light shone through the large glass windows, reflecting off the metal of the plane parked outside. Leah put down her coffee cup and said slowly, Do you ever get tired? Maya always being strong, always calm, always looking okay. Maya looked at her friend, her eyes soft. Yes, every day. But if we fall, who will stand up for the other girls? That answer made Leah silent for a long time. Then she chuckled. You really don't know when to stop, Maya replied. Because if we stop, we will return to the starting point. And that point, I left a long time ago. The waiting room door opened, and a boy of about 12 walked past them, holding his mother's hand. He looked at Maya and Leah, smiling innocently. Maya nodded slightly in greeting. His mother smiled back, her eyes warm. A small, simple, but beautiful moment. Leah looked at that scene and said softly, Sometimes just a look like that can make any wound breathe easier. Maya nodded, her voice as light as a breath, because it says, "I'm not invisible." The loudspeaker sounded again, this time announcing their flight. AeroWest Flight 908 to Los Angeles will begin boarding in 20 minutes. First-class passengers, please prepare to board. Leah closed her laptop and put it in her bag. It's time. Maya stood up and looked around the waiting room one last time. Everything was as usual: men in suits, women on their phones, soft laughter mixed with background music. No one knew that the two women who had just risen from their seats held the future of the airline in their hands. When they stepped out into the hallway, Heather was standing at the boarding gate, checking the list. She glanced over, her voice professional. "Good afternoon," Maya replied in a soft, almost emotionless voice. "Good afternoon, Miss Adams." She saw Heather stiffen slightly at the sound of her name. Something in the way Maya said it made her flinch, if only for a second. Leah saw it, but said nothing. They walked, Maya's high heels making a soft, even sound on the floor. Ahead of them, the doors to first class opened, white light reflecting off the ceiling of the narrow corridor. Leah said softly, "Maya, whatever happens, remember, I am not just a passenger on this flight. I am an example to the world that calm can be a form of strength." Maya nodded, a thin smile on her lips. "I know, and sometimes silence is the loudest voice." The door closed behind them. Outside, another plane was leaving the runway, trailing a trail of smoke like a line connecting the past and the present. Little did they know that just a few hours later, they would rewrite a new page in the history of this airline, with their calmness, humanity, and determination. The first-class cabin glowed with a soft golden light, reflected through the curved glass of the plane's windows. The smell of new leather from the seats mixed with a light perfume, the kind of luxurious scent that one would pay thousands of dollars more to smell. "Dr." Maya Thompson walked slowly in, her eyes scanning the space, feeling like she was entering another world, where everything was designed to make one feel like they belonged to the privileged class. Leah Collins followed right behind, a small handbag on her shoulder, her smile still there, gentle and somewhat ironic. Heather Adams stood at the front of the cabin, passenger list in hand. She forced a professional smile as Maya and Leah approached, but her eyes couldn't hide the awkwardness. "Welcome aboard. Ladies," she said, her voice even but strained. "Your seats are just here, 1A and 1B. Please, make yourselves comfortable." Maya nodded slightly, replying softly, "Thank you." Then she turned to Leah. "Sit by the window. I want to watch the clouds when we take off." Leah laughed, pulling back the curtains slightly. "Cloud watching. You know, that sounds more like a metaphor than a whim." Maya smiled but didn't answer. She put down her bag and opened her laptop to check a few last emails before the flight. Heather passed them with a tray of drinks, but didn't ask if they wanted anything. She stopped in the row behind them and leaned down to chat cheerfully with two white businessmen, their voices soft as honey. Their laughter rang out clearly, while the front row remained silent. Leah observed, her voice low enough for only Maya to hear, "I guess first-class wine is for first-class people," in her eyes. Maya didn't look up, still staring at the laptop screen. "Don't let yourself get dragged down. She's playing her part. We just have to see it through." Leah tilted her head, "Looking at you," her voice softer. "You're always so calm." Maya chuckled, closing her laptop. "Not calm. Leah, I just understand that people are at their truest when they think they are in a position of superiority." A soft sound came from behind, A young, thin man in another flight attendant uniform was putting the customer's suitcase in the locker. He smiled when he saw Maya and Leah, bowing politely. "Good morning, ladies. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to call me. My name's John." Leah returned the smile. "Thanks, John. We're fine. But it's nice to know someone is willing to help." As John left, Heather turned back, her voice slightly raised. "John, please focus on the standard procedures. They'll call if they need anything." John nodded, but there was a hint of confusion in his eyes. Maya saw it. She recognized the young man's awkwardness at being forced into a mold he didn't fully agree with. The plane doors began to close. The captain's voice rang out softly. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds speaking. Welcome aboard Aero West Flight 908 to Los Angeles. We'll be departing shortly. Please fasten your seat belts." The sound of the engine starting up. A slight vibration spread along the fuselage. The cabin lights were half dimmed, leaving only a small strip of light running along the ceiling, reflecting off the seats. Heather went to check the seat belts, stopping in front of Maya's row. She bent down, her voice a little strained. "Seat belt, ma'am." Maya pulled the rope gently and locked it, her smile still there. "Thank you." Heather nodded and continued walking past. But before leaving, she said softly, just enough for Leah to hear, "Please, don't use the call button too often. We're a bit short-staffed today." Leah turned to Maya, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "What did she just say?" Maya replied gently. "It's not worth getting angry about. I'll need to observe further." The plane took off. The pressure made her ears ring slightly, the engine noise gradually calming. As they reached cruising altitude, Heather began serving drinks. She walked down the aisle, the wine tray shimmering in the light. When she reached their row, she passed without asking. A moment later, John returned. He put down the tray of drinks and whispered, "I'm sorry about earlier. Would you like something to drink?" Leah smiled gratefully. "A glass of water would be fine. Thank you." John nodded, poured water, put it down, and left quickly. Heather watched from afar, her eyes cold. Maya put her glass aside and looked at her friend. "You see, the problem isn't the system. It's the people who are allowed to keep silent." Leah was silent for a moment, then said, "Maybe people stay silent because they are afraid of losing their jobs. But then, that silence makes people like Heather think they have power." Maya looked out the window. Thick white clouds drifted outside, each mass floating like a giant sea of cotton. She remembered her first flight as a child, her eyes filled with excitement. Back then, she thought the sky was the freest place. She had no idea that as she grew up, even this weightless place was filled with invisible boundaries. Heather's high heels clicked on the carpet. She stopped, tilting the tray toward the rear passenger. Another champagne. "Mr. Louis Sure," the man replied, laughing. As Heather turned away, a few drops of wine splashed onto the floor and landed on the hem of Leah's dress. She looked down, her voice still calm. "You spilled it." "Heather Quilai." "Noi, Kyo." "Accidents happen. Maybe next time be careful when you move your legs." The statement made several nearby passengers turn their heads. Leah pursed her lips, about to speak, but Maya placed her hand on her friend's, her eyes signaling her to stop. Maya looked at Heather, her voice low, calm but hard as steel. "You can go on. I don't think we need anything else." Heather stood for a few more seconds, then turned away. Maya heard Leah sigh beside her. "You're surprisingly calm." "Maya, I learned to be calm when people judge me just for existing, Maya replied. Her eyes still turned toward the window. And I also learned to let the facts speak for themselves. Leah was silent. The plane continued its journey, the sound of the engines and the wind a long, silent song. She looked at her friend, realizing that behind the calmness lay a deep, inner turmoil, where anger and pride battled each minute. In the dim light, Maya reopened her laptop and wrote a few short notes. Observations, employee attitudes, bias, lack of diversity, awareness training. Action needed immediately after merger. She saved it and hung up. Leah looked at him and smiled slightly. Even when you are looked down upon, you still work, Maya replied. That is the only way to turn hurt into change. Outside, the sun was setting in the west, casting orange light on the wings of the plane. The cabin was bathed in a warm, almost sad light. Leah leaned her head back in her seat and closed her eyes. Maya looked at her friend, then back out. She thought of the sky, of the invisible limits humans placed on her, and of the flight she knew it would be more than just a journey from New York to Los Angeles. In Maya's heart, there was a vague feeling that when the plane landed, not only Heather, but the whole world would have to relearn the true meaning of the two words first class. The engines began to roar as the plane pulled away from the runway. Everyone in first class leaned back in their seats, and soft lighting filled the space. Doctor, Maya Thompson took a deep breath. She felt a gentle vibration under the floor, like a giant metal heart beating steadily beneath her. Leah Collins sat next to her, closing her eyes, letting her body flow with the plane's motion. Outside, New York receded into the distance, the city reduced to tiny squares of light. Inside, Heather Adams walked slowly down the aisle, her voice steady and polite to the point of artificiality. Ladies and gentlemen, our flight time to Los Angeles is approximately 5 hours and 40 minutes. Please relax and enjoy your flight. She smiled at the row behind her, where two white men were laughing and talking loudly. When she reached Maya and Leah's row, the smile stopped, replaced by a cold look. She handed them the drinks, but didn't ask if they wanted anything. Leah opened her eyes, her voice small but clear. Excuse me, could you please get us 2 glasses of water? Heather paused, tilting her head slightly. Oh, I'll get to you when I can, sweetheart. The word sweetheart rang out, soft in sound but heavy in meaning. It was no longer friendly, but condescending. Leah pursed her lips, her eyes darkening slightly. Maya placed her hand on her friend's, signaling silence. Heather continued walking. She stopped in the back row, poured red wine, and talked cheerfully in a sweet voice. Maya heard the clinking of glasses, the laughter, and then silence as Heather turned back to the front. John Parker, the young flight attendant, was a few steps behind Heather, carrying a tray of cookies. He stopped in front of the 2 women and smiled. Would you like some snacks or drinks? Leah nodded. Just water, thanks. He put down the glass of water and added 2 small tissues. If you need anything, just call. Heather glanced at him, her voice cold as ice. John, please remember your route. You're missing row 3. He nodded and left without saying anything more. Maya watched him go, feeling a little heavy-hearted. His silence was a kind of fear that she understood all too well. Leah held the glass, the light reflecting off her face, sparkling but sad. You see, a thank you or a look says a lot about how people see you. Maya put the glass of water down on the small table, her voice slow. Do you know why I'm not angry? Leah looked over. Maya continued. Because I want her to tell me everything she thinks. So when the truth comes out, no one can say we imagined it." Leah smiled faintly. "I know you always have a plan, but sometimes I just want to scream. We're people too." Maya gently took your hand. "You don't need to shout. Just standing straight, like you are doing, is enough to make people look back." Outside the window, the sky changed color. The daylight faded, giving way to a distant orange-red sunset. The cabin was bathed in that magical light, breathtakingly beautiful. But amidst that beautiful scene, something stirred in the heart. Heather returned, a carafe of champagne in hand. She stopped in Leah's seat, her voice harshly sweet. "Would you like some champagne? Leah chua kip jap, Heather jauntiep. Actually, it's complimentary for first class, but it's quite strong. Maybe a soft drink would be better for you." It was a false advice, masked in concern, but dripping with contempt. Leah looked at her gaze unwavering. "I think I know my limits. A drink, please." Heather paused. For a moment, her smile froze. Then she poured the wine, set the glass down on the table, and turned away without another word. Maya observed silently. She didn't need to say it, because she knew well such moments, small, subtle, but leaving lasting scars in the hearts of those who had experienced discrimination. After a moment, Leah whispered, "Do you think she would do anything different if she knew who we were?" Maya looked out the window, the last red light of day reflecting off her face. "Sure, but that's the tragedy. The plane was flying smoothly. The safety light was off." The passengers started to talk in hushed voices. A man stood up and took his luggage. Maya also unbuckled her seatbelt, intending to reach into the locker to get her laptop charger. Immediately, Heather rushed over, her voice sharp. "Ma'am, please sit down." Immediately. Maya turned back, her voice calm. "I just got my laptop charger. The indicator light is off. Heather Sayat chat. K Trong Te." For safety reasons, passengers should remain seated unless absolutely necessary. Her voice emphasized the word passengers as if to remind him that the other person did not belong to any special group. Leah opened her mouth, but Maya raised her hand, silencing her. She sat down slowly, buckling her seatbelt. The atmosphere in the cabin grew heavy. A few passengers glanced at each other, and some shook their heads. John walked by, caught Maya's eye, paused for a second, nodded slightly, as if in an unspoken apology. That small gesture made Maya's heart soften a little. She knew not everyone in that uniform was like Heather, but sometimes just one person with prejudice is enough to tarnish the entire uniform. Time passed slowly in the pale yellow light. Heather paced back and forth, arranging trays and adjusting blankets for a few passengers. She no longer looked at Maya and Leah, but the silence was more powerful than words. Leah leaned her head back and said softly, "I thought, when we got to this point, we would be treated differently. Turns out I was wrong." Maya smiled faintly, a sad smile. "No, you're not wrong. You just forget that there are people who haven't grown up yet." Outside, it was dark. The plane's wings glittered in the moonlight. Maya closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She wasn't angry at Heather, but at the system that made people like Heather think they could look down on others. She remembered her father, who had been refused service in a restaurant because he was black, and had said, "You don't have to scream to prove you're worthy. Just live so they're ashamed of themselves." The words echoed in Maya's mind like a reminder. She opened her eyes to see Leah staring out silently. The moonlight reflected off her face, beautiful and tired. Maya touched her hand lightly. "Are you okay?" Leah nodded. "Fine. I just wonder when people will see a person's worth beyond the color of their skin," Maya replied. "When those who have the power to see begin to see, and that is what we are doing." The two looked at each other, their smiles as light as a thin breeze. In the cabin, Heather passed by again, her eyes not daring to meet theirs. She had no idea that every little action she took was being etched into the memories of the two women, the ones who, in just a few hours, would make this entire airline face its true face. In the first-class cabin, amidst the luxurious lighting and artificial order, a truth is gradually revealed. A seemingly normal flight carries within it a lesson about how people treat each other when they do not know who the other person is. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 908 was heavy, yet everything remained impeccably luxurious. Every detail, from the neatly placed glasses on the table to the soft yellow lighting on the ceiling, seemed designed to bring a sense of security and relaxation. But for Dr. Maya Thompson and Leah Collins, that peace was just a facade. Beneath it all, an undercurrent was rising silent but powerful. Heather Adams walked past their row, her eyes never leaving. She had been laughing and chatting with the two passengers behind her, her laughter ringing as if she were in a banquet hall rather than a plane. Leah raised an eyebrow and set her magazine down on the small table. "She's still doing it," she said, her voice low but clear. Maya nodded, not answering. She looked at Heather, not with anger, but with the calmness of someone used to dealing with this type of person. She watched the way Heather bent down to serve the salt and pepper-haired man a drink, the way she tilted her head and smiled at the compliment, and then the way she straightened, coolly, as she turned to the two black women in the front row. Maya wasn't angry, but there was a simmering current in her heart. She understood that sometimes the difference wasn't in the words, but in the eyes and attitude. Leah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I don't understand how people still act like this in 2025. We've come this far, and we still have these old ways of thinking." Maya looked out the window, her voice low, "because prejudice doesn't fly with time. Leah, it just changes its skin. It looks more elegant, more refined, but it's still the same." The plane shook slightly, and the seatbelt sign lit up. Heather immediately took the microphone, her voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We're experiencing a slight turbulence." Leah fastened her seatbelt, then glanced at Maya. "Do you think, if I or someone like us were the flight attendants, would the passengers be respectful?" Maya smiled slightly. "I think so, but they'll be surprised before they respect." The plane shook a little more, then steadied. Heather checked each row. When she reached Maya's row, she stopped, leaning down too much. "Everything okay?" "Ma'am, you don't look too comfortable. Flying first class can be a bit much for first-timers." Leah listened, gripping the armrests of her chair. Maya looked straight at Heather, her eyes bright but not angry. "Thank you for your concern. But this isn't my first time flying first class. I'm used to sitting here." Heather paused for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Of course. My apologies." She turned away, but her eyes still held dissatisfaction. Leah leaned towards you, her voice low. "You know, just one sentence like that was enough to make me want to drop everything and tell her who you are." Maya smiled. "No need. She will know, but not by my words." John Parker, the young flight attendant, walked by and saw Heather with a frown on her face. He stopped and asked softly, "Everything all right here?" Heather. "Japnhan. Yes, everything's fine. Please focus on your assigned section. John nodded, his eyes glancing briefly at Maya and Leah. Something about the way he looked at her made Maya feel like she had an ally, even if she was silent. A moment later, after Heather had left, John returned with a tray of tea and biscuits. "Excuse me," he said softly. "Would you like some tea? It's chamomile, very calming." Maya smiled slightly. "Thank you. I really like chamomile tea." Leah accepted her glass, her voice softening. "You're the only one who makes this flight any more bearable." John Koike. "I just try to do my job right. People deserve kindness. That's all." He was gone, and Leah looked at her friend, her eyes shining. "See, there are people like him, small but precious." Maya nodded, her eyes softening. People like him are the hope of the future. Time passed slowly. The lights in the cabin turned to a soft, warm glow, signaling dinner time. Heather turned back, this time trying to keep her voice calm. "Dinner options tonight are beef tenderloin or salmon fillet. Which would you like?" Leah answered first. "Salmon, please." Heather wrote it down, then turned to Maya. "And for you, just a salad, please," Maya replied softly. Heather smiled wryly. "Sure. I'll make sure it's simple." There was that tone again, half concern, half sarcasm. Maya just nodded. As Heather left, Leah let out a small laugh, but there was a tiredness in it. "Do you think she noticed the contradiction in her words?" Maya replied. "No, because to her, it is natural." About 10 minutes later, Heather returned with a tray of food. She set down Leah's salmon, then Maya's salad. Before she left, she said, "Enjoy your meal, ladies." Her voice was artificially sweet. Leah tried the first bite, then frowned slightly. Not enough salt. Maya looked at her salad, then quietly put down her fork. Not because of the food, but because of the look Heather had given her, a look that was half challenging, half contemptuous. Heather left, and just as she did, a ding sounded. A passenger in the middle row pressed the call button. Heather hurried back to serve the person, leaving Maya and Leah alone. Leah put down her fork and said softly, "You know, what makes me sad isn't the way she treated us. It's that this probably isn't the first time, and it probably won't be the last." Maya looked at her friend, her eyes shining with sympathy. Probably not. But if today is the last time she dares to do it, then this flight was worth it. Leah looked at Maya longer, then smiled. "What are you going to do?" "Maya, nothing," Maya said slowly. "Just let the truth speak for itself, and it will." A moment later, Heather returned, doing a final check of the cabin before turning off the lights. She stopped near them, speaking softly but meaningfully. "If you ladies need anything else, please remember, we prioritize passengers based on availability." The words pierced the air like a cold needle. Leah turned, but Maya caught her hand. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let her talk." The plane was quiet. Everyone was asleep. There was only the steady hum of the engines and the dim light outside the windows. Maya opened her laptop and wrote a few more notes. Staff behavior observed discrimination, need for new training program, review of first-class service system. She saved it and hung up. Leah looked at her and asked softly, "Are you really going to do it?" Maya replied, "Yes. Not for me, but for those who will come after me." Outside, the moonlight reflected off the wings of the plane, shimmering like silver. Maya closed her eyes, feeling a strange sensation, both calm and boiling. She knew that what was coming was not just a story about two despised women. It was a story about how an entire system had to look at itself. The plane was still flying smoothly in the pitch-black night sky, the thin moonlight like a thread of light hanging in the distance. In the first-class cabin, everyone had fallen silent. Only the low sound of the engine mixed with the steady breathing of the thin air. But inside, Dr. Maya Thompson, that silence was being broken bit by bit. Heather Adams paced between the rows, the light reflected off her face, giving her the stern look that comes with being in a position of authority. She looked at Maya and Leah, frowning slightly as if their presence upset the already luxurious balance of the cabin. Leah leaned her head back, eyes still open. "I can't believe she's going to keep doing this. It feels like she's testing how much we can take," Maya replied softly. "Don't forget, sometimes people don't know they're challenging themselves." As soon as he finished speaking, the engine noise suddenly died down. There was a slight whine, and the cabin lights flickered. The plane swayed slightly, and the passengers began to stir. The captain's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some turbulence. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelts." Maya and Leah quickly buckled up, while Heather quickly checked each row. A passenger in the back, Mr. Lewis, looked a little panicked. "Is this safe?" he asked, his voice shaking. Heather smiled professionally. "It's perfectly fine, sir. Please stay calm." But when she turned back to look at Maya, her eyes were different, cold, dry. "Please don't move unnecessarily," she said quickly and walked away. Leah shook her head slightly. Her lips pursed. "See, it's us again." Maya looked at her friend, her voice low but firm. "Calm down. We're almost to the end." The plane shook a few more times before settling down. The passengers breathed a sigh of relief, and a few let out a soft chuckle. Heather turned back to continue checking. When she reached Maya's row, she leaned too close, her eyes filled with suspicion. "Ma'am, I need to make sure your seatbelt is properly fastened. Sometimes passengers misunderstand the mechanism." Leah looked up immediately. "What are you implying?" Heather replied, her voice soft but full of meaning. "Nothing personal. I just follow procedures." Maya remained silent. She let Heather examine her, but her eyes never left the woman's face. For a moment, Heather paused, as if she saw something that made her uneasy and exaggerated calm, a kind of confidence she didn't understand. After Heather left, Leah leaned over. "I don't know how you stay calm. If it were me, I probably would have." "No," Maya interrupted, her voice soft as a breath. "If you react, people will think you're confirming what they already believe." Leah was silent, then nodded slightly. A moment later, John Parker walked over and gently placed a cup of tea on Maya's table. "You look like you could use something warm," he said softly. "Sorry for the turbulence earlier." Maya smiled gratefully. "Thank you. You don't need to apologize. You're doing your job well." Heather appeared shortly after, her voice harsh. "John, what are you doing? This section doesn't need additional service right now." John looked momentarily confused. "I was just—" "Go back to your section," Heather interrupted, smiling faintly. "We don't want to confuse passengers about protocol." He nodded and left. Heather turned to Maya and Leah, her voice cold. "I hope you're satisfied now." Leah jumped up, unable to contain herself any longer. "Do you have a problem with us? You've been acting so contemptuous ever since we got on the plane. Have we done anything to you?" The first-class cabin fell silent. A few passengers turned to look. Heather took a step back, trying to keep her voice calm. Ma'am, please lower your voice. This is first class. Exactly, Leah said, her voice tight with restraint. And as first class, we deserve to be treated like any other passenger. No more, no less. Maya placed her hand on Leah's arm and shook her head. Leah took a deep breath and sat down. Maya turned to Heather, her voice cold and calm. You don't need to apologize. But I hope you remember that courtesy is part of our standard operating procedure. Heather looked at her, a flash of annoyance in her eyes. She turned away without saying anything. The air returned to silence. Jean glanced at them from afar, his eyes filled with worry. Maya sat up straight, her hands on the table. Tapping lightly, Leah said softly, "Do you feel like she's scared?" Maya replied, "No, she isn't scared yet, but she will be." About an hour later, Heather passed by again. She said to a passenger sitting nearby in a voice loud enough for the two of them to hear, "You know, some people just don't fit in certain places no matter how much money they have." The words felt like a drop of black ink in a glass of clear water. Leah turned around, about to speak, but Maya was already standing. "Miss Adams." Her voice was clear, not high but resonant. "I think you should choose your words carefully in this compartment, for I am sure you do not know who we are." The whole cabin was silent. Heather smiled faintly. "I don't need to know who you are to know where you belong." Maya looked straight into her eyes, a look that made Heather pause for a second. "Then maybe you'll find out soon enough." Heather tilted her head, trying to keep her composure. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am." Then she turned away. Leah looked at Maya, her eyes full of questions. "Are you just going to leave it at that?" Maya said softly. "No, but this is not the place." She sat down, opened her laptop, and wrote the last few lines in the document. Case in point: disrespectful behavior, subtle discrimination, service culture training required. Review of head flight attendant Heather Adams. She lingered, the light of the screen reflecting off her face, calm but cold. Leah watched, knowing that Maya's silence held more power than any scream. 2 hours later, the plane began to descend. The captain's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in Los Angeles shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for arrival." Heather walked over, checking one last time. When she reached Maya's row, she whispered, trying to keep her voice polite, "Thank you for flying with Aero West. Dr. Thompson." Leah looked up sharply. "You know Heather Mi Moi, Jeong No Han?" "Yes. The crew manifest just updated. My apologies for any misunderstanding." Maya looked at her, a very slight smile. "It's okay. I hope you have a memorable trip too." She nodded, her eyes wavering between shame and confusion. As Heather left, Leah sighed. "See." She noticed. Maya closed her eyes, her voice low and deep. "Sometimes, just a few hours in the sky is enough for people to realize where they were on the ground." Outside, the lights of Los Angeles loomed like a sea of stars on the ground. The plane banked slightly, preparing to land. No one in the cabin said anything more, but everything had changed. As the plane's wheels touched down on the runway at Los Angeles International Airport, the screeching sound was like a long sigh. The entire first-class cabin shuddered, then fell silent as the engines cut power. Heather Adams remained at the front of the cabin, her hands clasped in front of her, her face devoid of its usual confidence. The yellow light from the ceiling illuminated her face, highlighting her obvious confusion. Leah Collins unbuckled her seatbelt, her gaze sweeping over Heather, calm but no longer angry. Maya Thompson did the same. She looked out the window at the endless streetlights. Everything below seemed peaceful, but inside Maya, a different wave was stirring not anger, but deep thought. The loudspeaker blared, "Welcome to Los Angeles. Local time is 7:45 p.m. Thank you for flying with West Airlines." The familiar phrase echoed through the air, but this time, for some, it was no longer simply a greeting. Heather walked up and down the aisle, bowing. As she approached Maya and Leah, her voice trembled slightly. "Dr. Thompson, Miss Collins, I truly didn't know." Maya looked up, her eyes so calm and direct that Heather found it unnerving. "It's okay," Maya said slowly. "I know you don't know, but that doesn't change the fact that what you did was wrong." Heather pursed her lips, about to say more, but Leah cut her off. "The sad thing is not that you don't know who we are, but that you think that only by knowing you deserve respect." The air was thick. A few other passengers were gathering their things, but no one spoke. John Parker stood at the back of the cabin, his eyes on the three women. He knew he was witnessing something more important than an apology. Heather bowed her head slightly, her voice fading. "I'm sorry? Really sorry?" Maya nodded slightly. "I don't need your apology. Heather, I just hope that the next time you meet someone without a title, you'll still treat them the way you're telling me to now." Heather was silent. She said nothing more, just stood there, then turned away. There was something in her gaze that felt like shame, mixed with fear. As the doors opened, groups of passengers filed out. Leah and Maya remained seated. They waited until most of the others had disembarked before standing. Heather approached again, trying to keep her voice professional. "Would you like assistance with your luggage?" Ma'am Maya smiled slightly. "No need. I think I can carry it myself." They stepped out of the first-class cabin. John Parker stood near the door, nodding slightly. "Thank you for your patience, Dr. Thompson." Maya stopped and smiled at him. "Thank you, John. Keep up the good work. You make me feel like there is still hope." He smiled slightly, then bowed his head. As Maya and Leah passed, Heather avoided their eyes. She stood still, her hands clutching the passenger list, her lips pursed. Outside the plane, the Los Angeles wind was warm and dry. Leah took a deep breath, then exhaled. "I've never known a flight this long." Maya smiled, a tired, deep smile. "It won't last long. It'll just force us to face something we thought we'd left behind." As they passed through security, two men in black suits approached. One held a sign that read, "Dr. Maya Thompson, Skyline Air." Heather saw it from a distance. Her face paled. The man stepped forward and bowed. "Welcome back, Dr. Thompson. The company car's ready." Heather stood frozen in the doorway, watching. A few of the other passengers began to whisper. One woman turned to her husband and said in a low voice, "She's the new owner of Aero West, isn't she?" The man nodded. "Yes. And I think that flight attendant just made a very big mistake." John looked at Heather, then sighed. "You might want to sit down. Heather." She turned to him, her voice faltering. "She's the new owner, Ange Gatchow, and Ms. Collins, the co-founder of Skyline Air. They own us now." Heather didn't answer. Her thoughts from the flight echoed in her head. The averted glances, the forced smiles. She felt her face flush, hot, as if everyone around her was seeing through her deception. In the airport VIP lounge, Maya sat in front of the large glass doors, a glass of water in her hand. Leah walked over and put her bag down. "Do you think she'll get fired?" Maya looked out at the runway, where the yellow light stretched like a river of light. "No, I don't want that." Leah frowned. "Why, she deserves it." Maya put down her glass of water, her voice as light as a breath. "Because if we just fire her, others will see it as punishment, not a lesson. I want her to learn, really understand." Leah was silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. "You always think ahead of others." Maya smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "Don't think too far ahead. It's just that I was in her place, misunderstood, looked down upon. The only difference is that I had the chance to prove myself." An Aero West employee knocked lightly on the door. "Dr. Thompson, our media team is waiting to take pictures of the press conference. Would you like us to postpone it?" Maya looked at her watch. "No need. I'll be right there." As they left the room, Leah looked at Maya, half joking. "If the press finds out about this flight tomorrow, they'll say you flew with your own staff and were discriminated against." Maya smiled. "Maybe they will, but if it makes someone rethink how they view others, then I don't mind." Outside the press room, Heather stood by the security gate. She hadn't been called, but she stayed. When she saw Maya pass, she bowed deeply. "Dr. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I behaved terribly. There's no excuse." Maya paused. She looked at Heather, not with cold eyes, but with the calmness of someone who knows the value of forgiveness. "Heather, have you ever wondered what makes people lose respect for others?" Heather looked up, her voice soft. "Maybe because of fear, because she thought someone else was threatening her position." Maya nodded. "Yes, and when that fear overwhelms compassion, we become the people we once hated. You're not ugly, Heather. You just forgot that kindness is not a status symbol." Heather was silent. Tears fell silently. Maya looked at her for a second and then walked away. Leah walked beside her and said softly, "You just saved her?" "No," Maya replied softly. "I just gave her a chance to save herself." Camera flashes flashed in the press conference hall. Maya stepped onto the podium, smiling calmly. She began her speech in a soft but clear voice. "We can build the best airplanes, the most comfortable first-class cabins, but without respect, we are still flying on an empty platform." The room was silent. Leah stood beside her, looking at her friend with pride. Heather was outside, listening through the screen, tears still falling. Maya ended her speech with a memorable quote: "A flight is only truly safe when everyone on board feels equally valued." The auditorium erupted in applause. Leah said softly, "That is the message the world needs to hear." Maya smiled. "And that is what we must live to prove." The next morning, Los Angeles was still hazy. The early morning sunlight filtered through the glass curtains of the high-rise conference room and shone on the long wooden table where Dr. Maya Thompson sat. On the table was a detailed plan for the official launch of Skyline Air after the merger with Aero West was completed. The room was quiet, except for the soft tapping of keyboards. Leah Collins walked in, holding 2 cups of hot coffee. "Our morning coffee," Leah said, setting the cup down in front of her friend. "There's nothing better to start the day after a long and unforgettable flight like yesterday." Maya looked up, a smile appearing on her face. Unforgettable is the right word. Leah sat down, her eyes still heavy. "I can't stop thinking about Heather. She must have been up all night." Maya nodded. I think so. But maybe that's what she needed. We can't learn anything without feeling insecure about our own actions. Leah was silent, then whispered, Are you really going to keep her? Maya leaned back in her chair, her voice low and soft as a stream. Yes, but not in her old role. I want her to be part of the corporate culture training program, not as a student, but as a narrator. She will tell her own story. Leah looked at you, her eyes a mixture of surprise and admiration. You always have a way of turning things into a lesson instead of a judgment. Maya laughed. We can't build a better airline by eliminating people. We have to change them and let them change us. The meeting began. AeroWest's top executives entered, their faces tense. They all knew what had happened on the flight had been circulating internally. Rumors that the airline's new owners were being discriminated against by their own employees spread faster than any memo could. Maya stood, her voice soft but clear. I know you've heard about what happened on Flight 908. I'm not here to blame or humiliate anyone. I just want to talk about what we need to learn. The room was silent. Maya walked to the glass door and looked out at the waking city. AeroWest once prided itself on being the iconic American airline. But true icondom isn't about leather seats or gourmet meals. It's about how we treat our people. A male manager spoke up, his voice reserved. We're really sorry, Dr. Thompson. This is not the culture we want to maintain. Maya turned back, her smile calm. I believe so. But the important thing is not to apologize to me, but to make our passengers, whoever they are, whatever their seats, feel respected, Leah added, her voice sharpening. From today, Skyline Air will implement the One Sky program. This will be the foundation for all employees, from flight attendants to management, to understand that the sky belongs to everyone. A small murmur arose. A female manager asked, What about Heather Adams, the chief flight attendant of Flight 908? Maya replied without hesitation. She will be the first one to join the program, not to be punished, but to learn to reinvent herself. I believe she has the courage to face it. After the meeting, Maya stepped out onto the balcony. A gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of sunshine and the humidity of the distant sea. Leah stood beside her, looking out at the slowly crowded city. You know, yesterday, if I were in your shoes, I would have been angry. Maya smiled, a knowing smile. I used to think anger could change the world, but then I realized calm and compassion are more powerful. A phone rang. It was John Parker. His voice was shaky, but sincere. Dr. Thompson, I just want to thank you. I didn't get to say much yesterday, but I learned the most important thing. Silence in the face of injustice is a form of complicity. I promise not to be silent again. Maya smiled. Thank you. John, we need more people like you in this industry. Hanging up, she turned to Leah. He'll go far, not because he's perfect, but because he knows when to speak up. That afternoon, Heather walked into the internal training room. Her eyes were tired, but determined. On the big screen, the words one sky for all appeared. She took a deep breath, then saw Maya at the back of the room. Dr. Thompson, Heather said softly. Thank you for not firing me, Maya replied. I don't need your thanks. Just remember how you felt yesterday, and make sure no one else has to go through that. Heather nodded. I will. I want to be a better person, not just a good stewardess. Leah stood beside him, her smile warm. And that's why you're still here. A week later, the press began reporting on the cultural transformation at AeroWest. One major newspaper ran an article headlined, "From Prejudice to Empathy: How Two Black Female CEOs Are Changing America's Skies." Below, Maya and Leah were pictured at the press conference, their smiles calm and strong. Social media has been flooded with thousands of supportive comments. One person wrote, "I have been treated badly on a flight because of my appearance. Thank you for speaking up for us." Another commented, "The world needs more people like them who don't just react, they act." Maya read those words in her office and felt a strange feeling, not pride, but relief. She understood that this was not just a personal victory, but the beginning of something bigger. Leah walked in, holding the newspaper. "See, they call us symbols of hope." Maya smiled. "Hope is not something to hang in the newspaper. It is something to live with every day. Yesterday was our story, but tomorrow must be everyone's story." Outside the window, the Los Angeles sky was clear. A plane bearing the new Skyline Air logo flew by, its fuselage illuminated with the words "One Sky, One Heart." Leah watched, her eyes shining with hope. Maybe the sky really is changing. Maya nodded, her eyes soft yet steady. The sky was never the problem. Leah. It was the people below that needed to learn to look at each other again. Both were silent. In that moment, they felt something simple but profound. Their journey did not end when the plane landed. It had just begun. A year has passed since that fateful flight. But for Dr. Maya Thompson, every time she looks up at the sky, she still remembers the feeling of that day, the light reflecting off the window, Heather's cold voice, and the moment when the truth came out and changed everything. Now, at Skyline Air's headquarters in Los Angeles, the atmosphere is different. The company culture has changed, not just in media reports, but in the way people actually treat each other. This morning, Maya walked into the large conference room where the One Sky, 1 year later review was taking place. Leah Collins was there, reviewing videos sent in by employees from around the world, flight attendants bowing to passengers with genuine smiles, engineers of color proudly displaying their badges, passengers writing letters of thanks for being treated fairly. Leah looked up, a smile on her face. "You know, Maya, a year ago, I didn't think things could change so quickly." Maya sat down beside him, her eyes soft. "Not so fast. It only happens when people start really looking at each other." They watched a video from the New York branch. Heather Adams appeared in the frame, her hair cut shorter, her eyes bright and confident. She was standing in front of the training class, her voice soft but firm. "I used to think I knew my customers, but I forgot that what customers want is not service, but to be seen, to be heard, to be respected." In the video, Heather pauses for a moment, looking straight into the camera. "A year ago, I made a mistake. But it was that mistake that made me understand that only when we have the courage to look at ourselves can we fly higher than our own prejudices." Leah smiled, her eyes welling up. "She's changed," Maya nodded. "People can change when given a chance. Remember, I told you on that flight that I didn't want her fired. Now you see why." A staff member knocked on the door and entered. "Dr. Thompson, the anniversary press conference starts in 10 minutes. Maya nodded. "I'll be right there." As the door closed, Leah turned to her friend, a hint of pride in her voice. "You know, Maya, you didn't just change an airline. You changed the way people see leadership. A CEO doesn't have to shout to be heard, just be quiet enough to believe." Maya smiled. "I don't change anyone. Leah, I just help them see themselves in a different light." They entered the large hall. Hundreds of staff and guests were seated. A giant screen showed the words "One Sky," a year of empathy and change. Applause broke out as Maya took the podium to speak. Her voice was even, soft, but full of weight. A year ago, on a flight from New York to Los Angeles, I learned the most important lesson of my life, that our differences don't keep us apart. It's how we see them that does. She paused, looking around the room. We can build 1,000 planes, but what keeps people coming back isn't leather seats or wine. It's the feeling that they're respected like no other. Leah stood behind, listening. She knew Maya was speaking from the heart, not just as a CEO, but as a woman who had known the skeptical looks, heard the small but painful words. Maya continued, "When we started One Sky, I didn't expect change to come so quickly, but you have surprised me. You have shown that compassion is not just a slogan, but an action every day. From the engineer who keeps the wings clean to the flight attendant who bows with sincerity. You have all created what I call a sky of compassion." The whole hall was silent. A few people wiped away tears. After her speech, Maya stepped down from the podium. Heather approached, holding an old photograph, the one of Maya and Leah entering first class that year. "I keep this as a reminder," she said, her voice shaking, "that no one is born perfect, but everyone can learn to be kinder." Maya looked at her eyes gentle. "Thank you, Heather. You have come a long way." Heather smiled, tears rolling down her cheeks. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here learning that." Leah stepped forward and touched Heather lightly on the shoulder. "The important thing is that you chose not to hide. That makes your story valuable." As they stood together, a photographer snapped a photo. The photo later made the cover of Forbes Women magazine with the headline, "Forgiveness and Leadership When Empathy Takes Flight." That evening, Maya sat alone in her office. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. She opened her laptop and read thank you emails from all over. A passenger who said an Aero West flight attendant helped him get in despite flying economy. An employee who said the One Sky program made him feel more confident about talking about his heritage. Leah knocked on the door and entered, carrying 2 glasses of wine. "We deserve this," she said, raising her glass. Maya smiled, raising her glass. "No, Leah, everyone deserves it. We're just the beginning." They clinked glasses, the sound echoing softly in the quiet space. Leah sat down beside him, looking out the window. "Do you ever think, if that flight hadn't happened, things would have been different today?" Maya nodded slightly. "I guess so. But sometimes bad things come as gifts wrapped in lessons." Leah chuckled. "Only you could say something so philosophical." Maya turned, her voice low but warm. "You know, I still remember the feeling I had when I looked out the window that day. The sky was dark, but with just a crack of light, you knew dawn was coming. Today, I saw that crack of light everywhere. Outside, a Skyline airplane had just taken off. The flashing lights under its wings reflected off the clouds, like a greeting. Maya watched, her heart filled with emotion. She said softly, as if talking to herself, "Every flight is a story, and if we are brave enough to listen, we will see that in every person there is a piece of the sky." Leah was silent, just smiling. They sat there, watching the plane shrink and disappear into the clouds, carrying with it its message of kindness. On Maya's phone screen, a notification popped up, "Skyline Air, awarded Most Humane Airline of the Year." She smiled, turning off the screen, not because of the award, but because she knew that real change started with something very small, a flight, a look, a choice to respond not with anger, but with compassion. Maya stood up and looked at Leah. "Let's go. We have work to do. The sky's still wide open." Leah laughed. "And we'll fly again, right?" Maya replied. "Always." They left the office, the lights fading. Outside, Los Angeles glowed like a galaxy. In the sky, the distant hum of engines echoed, no longer of metal and power, but of faith, of compassion, of a world learning to see each other with human eyes. A year after the resounding success of One Sky, Skyline Air has become a new icon in the global aviation industry. The sky is no longer just a space to travel, but a symbol of human connection, of compassion that transcends all boundaries. On the top floor of her Los Angeles headquarters, Dr. Maya Thompson sits in her office bathed in early morning light. On her desk is a copy of Time magazine, the cover of which features her and Leah Collins standing among a multi-ethnic crew, under the headline, "Redefining the Skies When Empathy Leads." Maya turned the pages, her eyes not of complacency, but of contemplation. She remembered the early years, when Skyline Air was just a small idea in a competitive market. Now, after all the storms, they were not only flying together, but teaching the world how to fly with their hearts. The door opened and Heather Adams walked in. She was now the director of staff training, her hair still short, but her eyes different, calm and bright. "Dr. Thompson," Heather said softly, "I just received an invitation from the International Civil Aviation Organization. They want me to come to Geneva to talk about the respectful culture training program we're implementing." Maya looked up, her smile natural. "Good. You deserve it." Heather nodded slightly, her voice breaking. "I still can't believe that a year ago I was the one being reprimanded, and today I'm standing in front of the world talking about compassion." Leah walked in, heard that sentence. She smiled. "Sometimes, falling is life's way of teaching us how to walk more firmly." They looked at each other. No need to say more. But they all understood this was not just the story of three women, but the story of a whole world gradually learning to understand each other. That afternoon, Maya was invited to attend the Women Leading Change Conference in New York. The auditorium was packed with attendees from all over, from business leaders to social workers. As Maya stepped onto the stage, the spotlights made her close her eyes for a brief moment. In that brief moment, she remembered the flight, the prejudiced stares, her silence, and the moment she chose to respond with calmness instead of anger. Her voice rang out, deep and steady. "A year ago, I learned a lesson no leadership textbook could ever teach. I realized that true power lies not in power or position, but in the ability to keep your heart calm in the midst of the storm of injustice." The room was silent. Maya looked down at the faces below, the eyes that listened. "I didn't come here to tell my story, but to say that we, women, who have been overlooked, can change the world not by shouting, but by acting with kindness, by being steadfast in character." The applause was loud and long. Many people stood up. In the front row, Heather quietly wiped away tears, and Leah smiled, her eyes filled with pride. After the talk, a young Brazilian reporter approached. "Dr. Thompson, your story has gone viral on social media in my country. Thousands of women have said they found hope in the way you faced prejudice. Can you say something to them?" Maya looked straight into the camera, her voice warm. "Trust me, you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes, if you live right, the world will shut up to listen." The quote has been quoted millions of times online. Since then, The hashtag #OneSky1Heart has gone viral, becoming a symbol of the movement to promote respect and diversity in the workplace. A month later, One Sky was launched in Africa, Asia, and South America. Heather traveled to train staff, telling her own story with such honesty that it was heartbreaking. "I used to think skin color was what made us different," she said during a session in Kenya, "but now I understand that it's our hearts that connect us." Meanwhile, Leah was in charge of a program to support women of color in aviation. She organized training sessions where young girls learned how to navigate a prejudiced environment. One afternoon, after class, a little girl asked Leah, "Do you think someone like me can become a pilot?" Leah bent down and placed her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Not only can you will. Because the sky doesn't choose anyone. You just have to believe it belongs to you, too." That evening, Maya received an email from a man in Japan who said he had witnessed a passenger being discriminated against, but had been too afraid to speak up. After hearing Maya's story, he decided to take action when he saw something similar happen again. "Thank you, Dr. Thompson," he wrote. "Your story has taught me that silence is never neutral." Maya finished reading and smiled slightly. She raised her head and looked out the window. The Los Angeles sky that night was peaceful. The Skyline airplane flew by. The light reflected on the clouds like streaks of memory. Leah called, "Maya, did you know that we were just invited by the United Nations to attend the Global Leadership and Equality Conference?" Maya replied, her voice low and warm, "The world is flying with us, Leah." Leah chuckled, "And we will fly even further." Maya closed her laptop, her gaze distant. Perhaps the most beautiful thing about this story is not that we change the world, but that we realize the world can still change, if only someone starts. She stood up and walked to the window, where the city lights blended into the sky. The small planes disappeared behind the clouds, but in Maya's heart they did not disappear. They just kept going, carrying the hope, faith, and kindness of millions of people. A tear rolled down her cheek, but it wasn't sadness. It was the pure joy of knowing she had lived a full life, turned her pain into strength, and given something good to the world, and somewhere in the sky. A passenger smiles at a flight attendant after being treated with kindness, not knowing that they are living out the story a flight attendant mocks black women in first class seconds later, realizes they're the airlines, a story that never gets old, because kindness has no end. One March afternoon, Los Angeles was bathed in soft sunshine. Dr. Maya Thompson's office smelled of coffee, and soft jazz played. She had just finished a conference call with her European leadership team when her secretary walked in, holding a cream-colored envelope. "Dr. Thompson, this is a personal letter for you. The sender said it was important and wanted you to read it yourself." Maya looked up and took the envelope. In the top left corner was a small line. "From Claire Anderson?" She paused. The name brought back memories from years ago. Claire, the flight attendant who had worked with Heather and who had been on the flight that year. She opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, the handwriting soft and slightly shaky. "Dear Dr. Thompson," he said, "I don't know if you remember me. I'm Claire Anderson, the flight attendant who served in economy class on Flight 908 the day you and Ms. Collins were in first class. I was silent the entire flight. I heard Heather's words, saw the way she looked at you two, and saw her strangely calm gaze when everyone else was silent. But I did nothing. I was afraid. I was afraid of disapproval, afraid of being hated, afraid of being isolated. And it was that fear that haunted me for many years." Maya paused and leaned back in her chair. Outside, sunlight fell on her desk, creating a thin strip of light. She took a deep breath and continued reading. After I heard that you became CEO of Skyline Air, I quit my job. Not because I was ashamed, but because I realized I needed a change. I enrolled in psychology, specializing in human behavior in the workplace. Every class reminded me of you. I began to understand that silence can sometimes be more dangerous than insults. She paused at the next line, her hands shaking slightly. Dr. Thompson, I am not writing to ask for your forgiveness. I simply want to thank you, not only for not making a big deal out of it, but for choosing a response that made me realize that kindness can be more powerful than shame. You showed me that true power lies in remaining kind when others won't. A tear rolled down Maya's cheek. She put the letter down and looked out the window. The last rays of sunlight tinged the sky gold, reminding her of the flight, Heather's gaze, Leah's voice, and the powerful silence she had chosen. Leah walked in and saw Maya holding the letter. Are you okay? Maya smiled, her voice hoarse. It's fine. It's just... Sometimes the past finds its way back to you in a gentler way than you think. Leah pulled up a chair and sat down beside him. Who wrote this? Claire Anderson. She was a flight attendant on that flight. She just told me she's changed, and now teaches aviation ethics. Leah nodded, her eyes deep. You see, Maya, the seeds you've planted with your calm that day are blooming everywhere. Maya smiled slightly, then read aloud the last paragraph of the letter. Next month, I will be attending a Skyline Air conference in Chicago. I hope to see you again, not as a waiter, but as a student who has learned a lesson in courage from you. Leah took Maya's hand. Will you meet her? Of course. Who knows? Maybe she'll teach us something new. 3 weeks later, a conference on aviation etiquette was held in Chicago. Hundreds of employees from around the world attended. Heather stood on stage to introduce the guest speaker, her voice booming with confidence. And now, I would like to invite the person who has inspired me so much on this journey, Dr. Maya Thompson. Applause broke out. Maya stepped onto the podium, her gait still slow and graceful. When she spoke, her voice was deep and warm, filling the room. A flight is not just a journey between two destinations. It is a journey of people carrying their hopes, fears, and pasts. And sometimes, just a small act can make someone believe that there is still room for kindness in this world. When the speech was over, Maya stepped down. In the front row, a woman stood up, petite, her hair tied back, her eyes uncertain but bright. Claire Anderson walked toward Maya, holding another envelope. Dr. Thompson, Claire said, her voice breaking. I just wanted to say this directly. Thank you for teaching me the greatest lesson life has to offer, that silence is never an option. Maya took her hand and squeezed it gently. No one taught you. Claire, you learned by heart. I just happened to be there. Leah stood nearby, smiling. Heather also came over, bowed to Claire, and said, I've heard a lot about you. Welcome back to the sky. The three women stood side by side, and in that moment, the room fell silent. There were no speeches, no flashbulbs, just three people who had once been in three different positions, victim, perpetrator, and silent, now standing in the same light. That evening, Maya sat in her hotel room, looking out the window at the glittering Chicago sky. Leah called from Los Angeles, her voice bright. I just saw the video of the conference. People are saying the three of you together is the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. Maya chuckled, because it was real. No staged, no fake apologies, just three people facing themselves. You know, Leah said, this story is no longer ours. It's the world's. Maya was silent. She opened her phone and looked at the photo of Heather and Claire. In the warm yellow light, their smiles were so genuine it made her heart ache. She whispered, as if to herself, maybe the most magical thing is not that we change the world, but that the world changes us, little by little. Outside, the sound of a plane echoed in the distance. Maya closed her eyes, listening to the familiar sound, feeling the rhythm of life continuing. Another journey was about to begin, and she knew, as long as people had compassion, the sky would always be open for good things. 6 months after the Chicago conference, Skyline Air entered a new phase. The airline opened more international routes, and the One Sky program was recognized as a global standard model for aviation etiquette. Dr. Maya Thompson had almost nothing to prove to the world, but she still felt something was missing, because the further she traveled, the more she understood that kindness is not a destination, but a long journey, and sometimes that journey must go through new challenges. One autumn morning, Maya arrived at the office earlier than usual. A gentle breeze blew through the window, carrying the scent of coffee from the small roadside cafe. She sat down and turned on her computer. A series of congratulatory emails, cooperation invitations, and thank you letters appeared. But her eyes stopped at a different subject line incident report. Flight 621 to Nairobi. She read the report carefully. A passenger had complained that a Skyline Air flight attendant had discriminated against a family of color. Maya closed her eyes, not because she was angry, but because she understood, even after all, the journey of kindness was never easy. She picked up the phone and called Heather. Heather, I need you in the conference room right now. We have something to discuss. 10 minutes later, Heather walked in. Her face was pensive. I read the report. Maya, I'm sorry. It was a new flight. Some of the flight attendants were inexperienced. Maya stood up and walked around the table, her voice soft but firm. I don't care if they lack experience. I care if they are trained to understand the value of respect. Heather bowed her head. I will take responsibility. I will go to Nairobi immediately to work with that team. Maya looked at her for a long time, then said slowly, I will go with you. There are lessons that can only be taught by presence. 3 days later, they flew to Kenya. The flight was long, but uneventful. When the plane landed at Nairobi Airport, the bright sun shone through the clouds, making Maya smile. She believed that every time she returned to the sky, she was reminded of why she started. At the branch office, the flight attendants from Flight 621 stood in a line, their eyes filled with worry. The person named in the report was a young woman named Alicia, who had been on the job for less than 6 months. Heather looked at her and said, Alicia, do you have anything to say? Alicia clenched her fists. I didn't mean to do anything wrong. Dr. Thompson, the family was late, and I was just following the rules. But I admit, my tone may have been a little lacking. Maya nodded. I understand, but it's not just the words that offend passengers. Sometimes it's the way we look, the way we stop listening. Do you realize that Alicia was silent? Tears fell from her eyes as she said softly, I just want to do the right thing. Maya looked at her sympathetically. Right doesn't always mean good. When we only do the process and forget about the people behind it, we miss the most important part of this profession. Heather stood beside him, nodding. I used to be like you. I also thought being rigid was professional, until I realized it could hurt people. The atmosphere in the room softened. Maya stepped forward and put her hand on Alicia's shoulder. You're not fired, but you'll be staying here for 3 weeks, participating in a community project with us. You'll meet people who have suffered prejudice, listen to them, and learn your own lessons. Alicia looked up, surprised. You're not angry. Maya smiled slightly. If I get angry, what's the difference between me and Heather when she misunderstood me? I don't need another person getting hurt. I need another person who understands. That afternoon, Maya, Heather, and Alicia visited a children's center on the outskirts of Nairobi. Children rushed out to greet them, their eyes shining. A dark-skinned boy named Kofi ran up to Alicia, holding her hand and speaking in a broken voice. Are you from the plane I want to fly? Alicia bent down and smiled. When you grow up, I promise I will take you flying. Kofi smiled brightly, a smile that made Alicia pause. She suddenly understood that sometimes just one sentence was enough to make others believe in good things. She looked at Maya, her eyes filled with gratitude. On her last day in Nairobi, Alicia came to see Maya in her makeshift office. Dr. Thompson, she said, her voice shaky but firm. Thank you for not judging me. I understand. This profession is not about following rules. It's about trust. Maya smiled and handed her a ticket. A round-trip ticket to Los Angeles. You'll be flying with me, but not as an employee, as a student. I want you to observe how my team works. The return flight was a test. Maya watched Alicia chat with passengers, help an elderly woman, smile at a crying child. Heather watched and said softly, She's changed. Maya nodded. No one is unchangeable. Heather, as long as someone believes they can be better. As the plane landed in Los Angeles, Alicia turned to Maya and whispered, I learned something. Turns out, kindness needs to be practiced every day, Maya replied, her voice low and warm. That's right. Kindness isn't an instinct. It's a choice, and you just made the right choice. Back at the office, Maya wrote in her daily journal, Today, I relearned an old lesson that the healing journey is not just for the person who has been hurt, but also for those who have hurt. That evening, she called Leah. I think I just witnessed another beginning. Leah smiled through the phone. You always see the beginning in everything, Maya. But maybe that's why the world needs people like you. Maya looked out the window, where the lights of Los Angeles reflected in the night sky. No, Leah, the world doesn't need more people like me. It just needs everyone to be a little better. She closed her eyes. Maya saw Kofi in her mind, his smile in Alicia's eyes as she realized the true value of her work. Perhaps that was the greatest reward she could receive in this long journey, a journey of healing, both for others and for herself. On an April afternoon, the Los Angeles sky was tinged with golden sunset. In her office on the 42nd floor of Skyline Air headquarters, Dr. Maya Thompson was reviewing the annual report. The numbers were so good that one could believe there was nothing else to worry about. But she did not smile. A leader's intuition told her that behind those growth charts, there were still dark clouds that no one had noticed. The door opened. Leah Collins walked in, her face showing a rare look of concern. Maya, have you seen the news this morning? Maya looked up. No. What's wrong? Leah set the newspaper down on the table. The headline read in bold, Skyline Air accused of discriminatory hiring at Paris branch. Maya glanced at it, her eyes dark. I thought it was coming soon. Leah sat down and sighed. We've done everything we can to change, but there are still people who don't understand the true meaning of one sky. I don't understand. Maya, why good values are so easily distorted. Maya placed her hands on the table, her voice slow. Because kindness cannot be taught by slogans. It must be maintained by daily actions. And perhaps it is time we all took a strong touch to remember that. They called an emergency meeting immediately. Heather Adams, the training director, showed up after only 10 minutes, holding a file from the Paris branch. Here's the truth, she said, her voice low. A group of African American candidates were rejected from the interview process because the head of HR said, Skyline Air is all about being sophisticated and modern. They recorded the whole thing. The air in the room was thick. Leah spoke softly, her voice a mixture of disappointment and anger. Sophisticated and modern. How ironic. That's what people used to say about us. Maya said nothing. She stood up and looked out the wide window where the airline's planes were lining up for takeoff. In the old days, when we were judged, the word fit was used. Today, someone else is using the same word to exclude others. It's time to look at ourselves. 3 days later, Maya flew to Paris. She had no media or assistant, just Heather by her side. They arrived at the branch office in the bustling financial district, where the staff was buzzing with excitement as the news spread. The head of human resources, Jacques Morel, was waiting for them, his face rigid. Dr. Thompson, I apologize for this incident, he said, his voice reserved. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Maya looked him straight in the eye. Misunderstandings don't hurt that much. Mr. Morel, they're choices, not accidents. The room fell silent. Maya stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Skyline Air is more than an airline. We are a symbol of inclusion. If you don't believe that, maybe you shouldn't be here. Mr. Morel bowed his head. I understand. Maya motioned for Heather to lead him out of the room. As the door closed, Heather whispered, Don't you think you were too strict? No, Maya replied softly, her eyes fixed on the gray sky outside. No, I'm just protecting what we lost so much to gain. That afternoon, Maya asked to meet with the group of rejected applicants. There were 3 of them, 2 women and a man, all of African descent. When they entered, their eyes were wary and hurt. Maya smiled and said in a low voice, I know you've heard of me, and I know you don't believe that an apology will change anything. I used to think so too, but I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to listen. The man named Samuel spoke first. Dr. Thompson, you are a role model to many of us. But frankly, we are tired. Every time we hear a company say they care about diversity, we are turned into a display object, not a real person. Maya listened, her eyes welling up. I know how you feel. I've been in your shoes. And I promise you, Skyline Air won't let history repeat itself. She stood up and held out 3 invitations. I want you to be honorary advisors to the One Sky Global Program, not as employees, but as co-creators. Samuel looked at her, surprised. You really want us to work with you? Maya nodded slightly. If we want the sky to be fair, we have to build it together. They were silent for a few seconds. Then Samuel smiled and shook her hand firmly. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment overlooking the Seine. Heather poured her a cup of hot tea. You know, Heather said softly, when you're in our position, it's easy to forget that we were once small people. Maya put down her teacup, her voice light as the wind. That's why I'm always afraid. Not afraid of failure, but afraid of forgetting why I started. She took out her phone and texted Leah. I'm fine. Paris needs a refresh. But maybe I also need to learn to look at things with humble eyes again. The next morning, Maya held an open meeting for all branch employees. No stage, no slogans, just round chairs for everyone to sit on. She opened with the question, who among you has ever felt unheard here? At first, no one raised their hands, but then a young woman whispered, I used to be afraid to speak up because I thought I would be judged. Another added, I thought it was safer to just stay quiet. Maya looked around, her voice slow and warm. Silence may be safe, but it never creates change. From today, Skyline Air. Paris will be the first to adopt the no silence rule. Every employee has the right to speak and the responsibility to listen. Heather looked at Maya with pride. She knew this was what made Maya different. She not only healed people, but empowered them to be part of the change. A month later, the French press published an article with the headline, Skyline Air Paris, From Crisis to Model of Corporate Culture. Maya read the article on the flight back to Los Angeles. Leah sat next to her and said, half jokingly, see, every time there is a crisis, you turn it into an opportunity to teach the world a lesson in humanity. Maya smiled, leaning her head back in her chair. Maybe because I believe that behind every gray cloud, there is always a silver lining waiting to be seen. She looked out the window. The night sky was filled with stars. Another plane flew alongside in the distance, its lights flashing and greeting. Maya thought to herself that no matter what the challenges, she would keep flying, not to prove anything, but to remind everyone that kindness never goes out of style. 2 years have passed since Skyline Air became a global model of humanity in aviation. The world has changed a lot, and so has Maya Thompson. She is no longer the young woman who struggled against injustice, but a leader who knows how to create space for others to shine. That morning, Maya woke up in her small apartment on the Malibu beach. The wind blew gently through the curtains, carrying the scent of salt and coffee. She stood in front of the mirror, looked at her hair, which had a few strands of gray, and smiled. Perhaps it was a trace of a long journey that she had never regretted. Today's schedule was special. Leah had called early to remind her to prepare for Skyline Air's 10th anniversary celebration. The event was held at the largest convention center in Los Angeles, with thousands of international guests. On stage, a large backdrop displayed the airline's new slogan, Skyline Air, fly with heart, not just wings. Maya had written the slogan herself, after a long night of thinking about all they had been through. When Maya arrived, she saw Heather instructing the staff to arrange the guests. She was as energetic and sharp as ever. Heather ran up and hugged Maya. Dr. Thompson, I prepared your speech, but I figured you would speak from your heart rather than from a script. Maya laughed. You know me too well. From a distance, Leah approached, wearing a pale blue dress, her smile still as bright as the dawn. Maya, are you ready? I still can't believe we've come this far. Maya looked around and saw familiar faces, flight attendants, pilots, technicians, all wearing the Skyline Air logo on their shirts. Each of them had a story. Some had been victims of prejudice. Some had made mistakes but learned to correct them. Some had been afraid, but now were brave. And they were all standing here, together. The ceremony began. When the MC called on Maya to speak, the entire audience stood up and applauded. Maya stepped onto the stage, the light shining on her, reminding her of the first time she stood in first class on that flight, where it all began. She took a deep breath, smiled, and spoke slowly, her voice echoing throughout the room. When Leah Collins and I founded Skyline Air, I never thought it would become a symbol of hope. We just wanted to create an airline where everyone is treated with equal respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. But life has a way of testing our beliefs. It forces us to prove what we say is true by our actions, by our choices, by the way we treat others. The whole audience listened in silence. I was looked down upon because of the color of my skin. And the first thing I learned was pain can make you bitter, but it can also make you awake. Skyline Air was built from that moment of awakening. When one person chooses kindness over anger, they change the sky around them. The lights dimmed. Maya continued, "We have seen mistakes. We have learned lessons. We have fallen. But what I am most proud of is not the flights we have taken, but the people we have become along the way. I believe that each takeoff is not just a move from one place to another, but a reminder that we can soar beyond our past." Applause broke out. Many people were in tears. Heather stood below, her eyes red. Leah put a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "That's why I've been following Maya all this time." After her speech, Maya stepped down. Suddenly, the MC invited a special guest to the stage. The door opened, and Claire Anderson, who had sent Maya the letter, walked in. Beside her was Alicia and little Kofi, now older, wearing the cute little uniform of the scholarship program sponsored by Skyline Air. The whole audience was moved. Claire hugged Maya tightly. "I want you to know that, from that day until now, I have always taught my students one thing, that kindness can change a system, starting with one person who believes in it." Alicia bowed, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Dr. Thompson, thanks to you, I found the true meaning of work. Today, I am not here as a stewardess, but as a guide for the new generation." Little Kofi ran up and grabbed Maya's hand. "Maya, I remember the promise you made that you would let me fly. Today, I flew, and I want to be a pilot." The audience laughed, then applauded. Maya bent down and patted the boy on the head. "I believe you will fly higher than all of us." At that moment, Leah looked at Maya and said softly, "You know, this is your legacy, not the company, not the brand, but the hearts that are changed." Maya smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Leah, this is our legacy." That night, after the ceremony, Maya went to the beach alone. The wind was cold but pleasant. She sat on the sand, watching the waves crash against the shore. The sound of the wind carried memories from years ago. Heather's old sarcastic voice, Claire's shy eyes, Alicia's smile, and Kofi's clear voice. All of it blended into a soothing melody. She closed her eyes, wondering if her journey was complete. But then she smiled, because she knew the best journeys never end. The phone rang. It was Leah. "Maya, I just wanted to say, thank you for never giving up." Maya looked out at the night sea, the moonlight reflecting off the water. "I can't give up, Leah, because every time I see someone being respected, I feel like I'm flying." Leah was silent for a few seconds, then whispered, "I think the world needs more people who can fly like you." Maya chuckled. "The world doesn't need more people like me. It just needs someone to remember that kindness has wings." She hung up and looked up at the night sky. A plane was flying by, its lights flashing among the clouds. Maya thought that somewhere on that flight, someone was smiling, being treated with respect and kindness. And so, the story continued. The sky is never out of flights. just as people are never out of opportunities to be kinder. The story Flight Attendant Mocks Black Women in First Class Seconds Later realizes they're the airlines is not only about discrimination, but more deeply, a lesson about the power of kindness and common adversity. Dr. Maya Thompson, a black woman who was once looked down upon, chose not to respond with anger, but with tolerance and wisdom. That choice not only changed a person, an airline, but also changed the way the world views kindness. The story reminds us that kindness is not a weakness, but the most enduring strength of human beings. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, can create ripples that reach hearts we least expect. Life is full of prejudice and challenges, but what matters is how we respond to them, with hatred or with understanding. Let this story remind us to slow down, look deeper, and believe that every person has value and deserves respect. Thank you for listening, sympathizing, and accompanying us throughout this journey. If you believe that kindness can change the world, please like, share this story, and subscribe to the channel so we can spread more good things.